The NFL draft is almost officially upon us. One of the more exciting times of this very long and grueling NFL offseason. And to be honest, outside of the actual games, the draft does give us a couple of iconic NFL moments. You have very iconic slides like Lamar Jackson and Aaron Rodgers falling all the way to the end of the first round. The diamonds in the rough that are found in the later rounds, most notably Tom Brady being at pick 199. Some of these franchises being changed for the better good, whether it's Myles Garrett being drafted by the Browns, Patrick Mahomes to the Chiefs, or Josh Allen to the Bills. And most notably, you have some picks which were supposed to change franchises, but overall it ended up setting them back for many years to come. Overall, the draft is a chance for many teams to bolster up their squads with not only promising talent, but also very, very young talent. You look at some of these dynasties like the 90s Cowboys, that was primarily built through the draft. And it's really important that a lot of these teams don't swing and miss on their draft picks, because drafting a bust will set your franchise back by a good 5 years. But the thing about the draft, and when it comes to how many teams value it, honestly, it's very subjective, and it depends on what a team is looking for. Some teams overall, they build a championship squad by using their other assets, such as free agency money, and they sign available players on the market, and that's how they're able to build such a good squad. And in the end, they don't really need the draft because they already fulfilled a lot of the needs that they had. On the other hand, there are some teams that already won a championship and they have a designated core that they like to stick with, so overall they don't prioritize the draft because they already have a core of players that already work. On the other hand, the third hand, you have some GMs who just have the F them picks mentality and overall just use those as assets to acquire already established superstar players, and then that's how they end up building a really strong squad and it leads to winning. And again, they don't really care about the draft because they already have so many win now pieces. These teams, again, they don't care about the draft whatsoever. They already have incredible teams with the other assets that they have, so they can miss on a draft pick, and it doesn't really matter because they already have strong squads based on what they spent, whether it was money or the draft picks aforementioned. But on the other side of the coin, there are some teams that are desperate to have a very good draft. They are very dependent on having a good April, and that is how they end up building their team, basically being dependent on a bunch of rookies to basically make over their entire franchise. Look at the Lions in 2023. They drafted a bunch of notable players like Sam Laporta, Jack Campbell, Brian Branch, and most notably Jahmyr Gibbs, who overall they ended up turning the team around from a pretty good up-and-coming team to a NFC Championship appearance. Overall, if Dan Campbell and company and the rest of the management didn't have such a good draft in 2023, the Lions would probably not be in such a, decent position. They'd probably be the same old Lions that we've come to expect of them, which is pretty trash. And the same goes for a ton of other teams in the 2026 draft. There are a couple of franchises in which they depend a lot, and if they have a good draft, the sky's the limit, to be honest. But then if they have a bad draft, they can honestly sink, and it will show in the 2026 season. I, my friends, have 4 NFL franchises in which in this draft, they have all the chips on the table, and with a good draft, they can win it all and maybe make a big run or see heavy improvement in 2026, but then a bad draft could sink them lower, and it could set their franchise back by multiple years. Welcome back to No Huddle, and welcome to the biggest potential winners and losers of the NFL draft. So the first team that I want to talk about, I wanted to take a trip to the NFC East, and we want to talk about, quote-unquote, America's team, and that is, of course, the Dallas Cowboys. Overall, they have a very good amount of draft picks, having 2 first-round picks thanks to the trade that they made with Micah Parsons. They had a second as well, but they used it to trade for Quinnen Williams. And overall, the Cowboys have a very, very big hole on the roster. We know that they have a lot of strengths. They have an incredible wide receiver duo with CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens. Dak Prescott, for the next couple of years, should still be a very solid starter. They rejuvenated the running game with Javonte Williams. Their offense, for the most part, is basically set to make a deep playoff run. Unfortunately, when you look at the rest of the team, it is very, very incomplete. The Cowboys had one of the worst defenses, not just in the NFL, but basically of all time. They were getting carved left and right. They really had no big strengths outside of Quinnen Williams, who they traded for midseason. And overall, they got carved apart by many, many offenses who overall weren't even that good to begin with, like the Broncos. And overall, we know that if the Cowboys, if they are able to rejuvenate a defense, not even top 10, but even if they can get it to the top half or even the top 20, this Cowboys team can easily win the NFC East and maybe be one of like the sneaky contenders of the NFC. But overall, it's really important that they get these first round picks right. Will they be able to draft a high premier secondary talent or one of the edge talents that they have? I don't really know, but I do think that they need to prioritize it. They can either trade up or trade down to accumulate more draft capital. Maybe they can go and get like one of the big superstars like Ruben Bain, or they can just accumulate more players to kind of fulfill the volume of that defense. But overall, once again, I believe that the Cowboys have a good draft. They can return to the playoff setting that they were in the earlier part of the 2020s. But if they draft a bust, then once again, their defense is going to be very pathetic, and that's going to make them suffer as their high-powered offense will once again be wasted, and they'll probably not even make the playoffs once again. They got a ton of assets by trading away Micah Parsons, and that basically tanked their defense. But now it's up to Jerry Jones to fix that defense with those assets that he got from him, and we'll see what Jerry Jones is able to do in one of his last years on Earth. And before I go to the next team, I just wanted to mention a quick honorable mention, and that is the Cincinnati Bengals. The only reason that I don't have them completely on the list is because I could literally copy and paste everything that I said about the Cowboys, and that would apply to the Bengals. They also have a putrid defense, and overall, they also need to have a good draft on the defensive side if they want to return to their winning ways with Joe Burrow and company. But overall, the second team that I wanted to talk about is also in the NFC East, and that, my friends, is the Washington Commanders. They are trying to build upon that 2024 season in which they had Jayden Daniels. You have your franchise quarterback, and you have a decent amount of picks, including the number 7 overall pick in the draft. Overall, there are a ton of talented players in this draft, but the key thing is that the Commanders just need to get a lot younger. Their team last year was an absolute retirement home, and it showed as the Bengals were just not very good. So it's very important that they build out some sort of young core, because they showed in 2024 that when you have Jayden Daniels, you don't really need to have an incredible team. You have an NFC championship level ceiling with him as the quarterback, but you need to make sure that you actually give him a competent supporting cast, because if you just fail him over and over again, you're going to waste arguably the biggest talent that you have had in the last couple of years. And again, when it comes time to pay him, or you might have to trade him or whatever, he's probably not going to want to stick around. Overall, like they need to find a way to protect them. They need to bolster up that defense, which was insanely old. No more of Von Miller or Bobby Wagner. Austin Eckler is coming off an injury, and he's also extremely old. Terry McLaurin is now on the downward side of 30. So overall, it's just like Jayden Daniels is really the only young and up-and-coming piece in this entire squad. They need to rebuild basically their entire roster, defense, and the rest of the offense, because again, if they fail Jayden Daniels and are unable to make the playoffs, it would be a catastrophic failure, and they would have wasted probably the most promising 5 to 10 years that this franchise has ever had. So please, Commanders, for the love of God, just get a tad, or not even a tad bit, get a lot younger. The third team that I wanted to talk about, we take a trip to the AFC now, and we go all the way to the other side of the country, because we're going to talk about the Los Angeles Chargers. Obviously, they have faltered in the playoffs now for the second straight year. They lost to the Texans and now to the Patriots. So they're trying to basically bolster up their team, because they want to become the true contenders of the AFC. They want to be up there with the Patriots and the Bills and maybe even the Broncos. And we obviously know that the biggest weakness that the Chargers had last season was their horrendous, downright awful offensive line. Justin Herbert was getting hit left and right. He was basically injured from around the third game and on. He had to play and he had to pour blood, sweat, and tears just to take a performance out of any given night. I feel like he was given PTSD. Madison Beer has to calm him down after every single game with how much trauma he endured. But overall, the Chargers, they don't have as much draft capital, but they do still have a decent amount of picks to build their offensive line with. There are a couple of prospects that I believe they should look into. And overall, it doesn't even matter if you get, not the best prospect. It's not really about getting the best prospect. It's just about filling guys there. Because we saw it in around, the first couple of weeks and in the past in Justin Herbert's career. If you give him a decent supporting cast, he can perform really, really well. He can perform MVP-level football. But if you keep letting him down, not only is his confidence going to be shot, overall, you're not going to be a good team if your quarterback is either hurt, shot in the confidence side, or just overall just getting killed on every other snap. Also, the Chargers, I believe they do need to do something about the receiver end. overall, it's not a terrible core, but I don't think that Ladd McConkey can be your number one receiver and overall be like, and you can be a true contender. I feel like you need another guy in there, or at least like a number two receiver, so you can bolster up that room overall. And I do think that they need to bolster up their defense once again, because while it was really, really good last year, the absence of Jesse Minter now, when he headed to Baltimore, is going to be very prevalent. So I do think that the Chargers overall, in free agency, they didn't really do anything. It's not like they made a bunch of moves and are now set. Otherwise, you need to have a good draft because either Justin Herbert this next year is probably make or break. I don't know if he's gonna take away the if man allegations, but if they have a bad draft, then we're gonna have some really, really nasty conversations about Justin Herbert. And the final team that I want to talk about today, we're going to stay with the NFC West. We're only going to talk about two divisions today. And it's overall probably the most polarizing team in the entire NFL, or one of the most hated teams in the entire NFL. And that, my friends, is the Kansas City Chiefs. After a disgusting season and a failure of a season in which Mahomes also tore his ACL, the Chiefs are trying to return to their dynasty ways and trying to rebuild a new core to begin the second half of the Patrick Mahomes era, similar to what the Patriots did in around the 2010s with Tom Brady, getting in new pieces. And overall, we saw that they did a lot in free agency. They were able to sign Kenneth Walker to bolster up the running game, and they accumulated a ton of draft picks thanks to some trades that they made with the Los Angeles Rams. But obviously, there is one very, very glaring hole that this entire free agency period left the Chiefs with. They traded away Trent McDuffie, their best corner, and along with other guys like Jalen Watson. And overall, their secondary is now extremely, extremely thin. I would even go as far to say as it's pretty much non-existent. With the 9 overall pick, they can pretty much draft any elite secondary talent. Maybe they could go take a look at a Caleb Downs or something like that. Or maybe just some other secondary prospects. They just need to get whoever is the best out there. But overall, the secondary is very, very key because if they do not bolster up that unit, or if they end up whiffing on a pick and land the next version of Jeff Okudah, the Chiefs defense is going to be absolutely putrid, and we're probably going to see some of the most disgusting wide open touchdowns put up against that Kansas City defense. It's going to be 2021 all over again with Daniel Sorensen being so unbelievably bad. Overall, I think the Chiefs' offense is pretty much set. They have a new running game. Mahomes should still be at his best. He should be able to still make some of that lackluster receiving core better. But if they want to return to the playoffs, they have to fix up that defense because otherwise, they're probably just going to be a diet version of the Bengals or the Cowboys in which they have a decent offense, but then their defense is going to pretty much let them down every single week. And overall, every year that you wasted the Patrick Mahomes era is a giant missed opportunity because it's basically Super Bowl or bust when you have such a great quarterback on your side. So please, Chiefs, if you don't want to waste basically the second half of your superstar quarterback's career, it is very important that you get this NFL draft right. And overall, that is the end. These GMs are going to have a lot of pressure on them because it's very important that they get it right. But I guess we'll just have to wait and see in around April 23rd in Pittsburgh to see if these teams are actually competent or not. But overall, guys, thank you guys so much for watching. If you guys like this video, please subscribe and like to show support as it is very truly appreciated. And overall, I will see you guys in the next one.